What's good, meaningful movers? Welcome back to Moving With Me, the podcast where actions have meaning, words have meaning, and we open up the conversations to discover what's your next move. I'm your host, Krystal. In today's episode, I have a feeling we are going to relate to many people out there making a living. We work so much that we work right through our exhaustion. But you know how we do it here? We need to set that theme, so let's go ahead and do that. The word of the day is imposition. It's amazing how we impose expectations on ourselves that are realistic but unsustainable. Ever wonder why we feel the need to achieve something? Then we do. We never feel like it fills the tank or even acknowledge ourselves for the accomplishment, even when others tell us so. Alas, the Energizer Bunny is a myth, and sometimes it's not until we lose someone precious in our lives or when our own lives are at stake that we tap into our natural superpower. But that's enough of me talking. How about we introduce our guest, and there's no one better to do that than herself. Lolita, why don't you give the people a bit of background about yourself and what you're going to share with us today?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Lolita Guarin, and I'm a stress management coach. I'm also a 4 times best-selling Amazon author, and I do a lot of online classes and one-on-one coaching, and I go to companies and teach how to prevent stress and burnout in the workplace. So yeah, I'm all about stress and all about how that influences. But hey, we already know what stress is bad for you, but I will be so happy to talk about how we can prevent that and where that's really coming from.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, I think we'll start with, and we're going to title this Making Your Way. So how did your life start off with, growing up and everything?
So probably for those who are listening in and they listening in attentively can tell that my accent is definitely not from Texas, although I live right now in Texas. I came from Lithuania 24 years ago now. Whew, feels forever already. So when I was growing up, I was born in Soviet Union, but then we became independent. And of course, I always wanted to go and get my dream. And I came here to US and I was working until, the stress, burnout and all of that impacted my health so much that I was like in my 30s and realized, okay, I need to start doing something differently in my life because the way I'm handling stress is not working for me. And one thing I can say, it doesn't really matter what country you grew up. I noticed that there is the same thing happening with a lot of my clients that I coach also. It's about your childhood. What environment you grew up? Were your parents happy and telling you how to deal with your stress? How they manage their own stress. So we really want to know more about ourselves. You just pay attention and remember how your parents were behaving around you, and then you can start off from there.
Okay, well, let's share a little bit about that personality of yours, or at least your personal story with your childhood. How did that influence you?
So, when I mentioned when I was all stressed out, burnout, and physically impacted, I started digging in more into natural ways how to manage my stress. We all know by now there are lots of stress management staples like do meditation and do yoga and all of this and time management. And I was doing pretty well. That really helped me. But then one day when I was already a stress management coach, and that's like 10 years ago, I was reading the book about how to do business. And the author shared that she grew up with a father who was alcoholic, and that was the first time that I ever heard about that there's such thing as adult children of alcoholics. I was like, wait a minute, that's me, because my dad was an alcoholic. And then that really opened up the understanding for me, like, oh, now it makes sense why I'm so stressed out. Why am I so always hypervigilant? Why am I a workaholic? Basically, it's this. If you grew up in an environment that you didn't get enough what you needed, and, it could be not necessarily food or shelter, but emotional needs. Even if you think you grew up in a very happy family and you have brothers and sisters and it looks like it's fine, but what you really needed was not there for you as of validation and support and just being seen, you will grow up in that environment thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not being loved for who I am. It's not enough for me just to be me. So I'm going to become useful. I'm going to be this high achiever. And that's who I've become, and I know there's so many, this popular thing of saying, okay, well, if you grew up with a parent who was an addict, then, you're probably going to be an addict too. the whole time I was like, this is no way, because I never like had an addictions for like drugs or alcohol or any other addictions. And I'm like, I'm doing pretty good. Right. Until the day I realized, wait a minute, I am like a total workaholic. That's a workaholic too.
We forgot about that addiction.
Yeah, because if you're high functioning in the society, nobody cares about you. Meaning you're doing great, you're paying your bills, you take care of your kids. Okay, cool. We don't need to take care of you. But, that's one of the things that I'm really so passionate to talk about, is that so many who suffer from addiction, and addiction is basically self-soothing mechanism when you are so in pain that you want to run away. So then you will go to addiction to get some relief. And that's a totally normal thing for the body and for the brain to do it. But of course, you see a lot of those programs, and there's so much of conversations really in the society about how to help those who are addicts. But what happens to those kids like me, that I grew up and I'm very highly functioning, right? I go to work and I pay my taxes and everything is fine, and I'm not an addict, I don't cause problems to my family. I'm actually overachiever. I'm doing all those amazing things, and look at me, and I'm doing so great. But the bottom line is I'm all burnout, stressed out, because it's like I'm running for the horizon that I'm never going to achieve. And that's another addiction. The way I felt like, because I wasn't seen, my father was not there emotionally. He was there physically, but not emotionally, obviously. I'm like, okay, I need to be better so he can see me. And that became my addiction, to constantly being better and bettering myself. And that's not really self-love, because if you self-love or any love, it's unconditional love, right? Like, mean you accepting that person the way they are. And I was definitely not loving myself. So that's what made me sick.
Interesting. I like how you mentioned hypervigilance, because that was something I was living in day to day. I'm just replaying this in my own career as well. I had to be better. I had to do more. Just succeeding wasn't enough, because you're looking for the recognition. You're looking for all this other stuff. One of the things that I think we talked about, I didn't know how to take a compliment. So if they said good job, I was like, what do you mean good job? That wasn't enough. It was never enough. And how you mentioned overachieving as well, I can imagine so many people going through that. We are burning ourselves out. Sometimes it's like we're doing really good stuff, really good work, we're really good employees, we're all these things, but we'll like burn ourselves out of being good, to the point where, like you said, we start to feel sick. So that sickness can manifest in several different ways. How did it manifest for you?
So because of the stress, and especially for women, it really messes up the hormones. And when the women gets messed up the hormones, it just is not pretty. So nope. I'm just not going to go into details, but ladies can sure can relate. And so, when they told me like, good that you arrived early, otherwise I'll be dead by now. You start listening and like, okay, wait a minute, I really need to pay attention what my body tells me.
Wow. Okay. So you were just feeling bad. You went to the hospital and they ran some tests. Did they recommend anything to you, or did you go looking for yourself kind of on your stress management journey?
So when all of that system went out of whack, because I was in my 30s and there was not like some sort of disease that they can find. It's not like, you have this and this, so here are the pills and you take care of it. No, basically all of that was caused by stress and burnout. And when you really think about it, all of those illnesses that we have, it is caused by stress and burnout, by us not feeling supported and appreciated and all of this. When you are in a constant alertness, so I'm sure you heard, and your listeners heard many times, like, well, imagine a gazelle is running, eating grass, and then sees the lion, and the lion chasing her, and she's running away, and then the lion's gone, and the gazelle just goes into the same peaceful place where it just keeps on eating the grass. Well, humans, we cannot do that, especially if you grew up in the environment where it was already very stressful. So for you to be in a high alert every day, it's your normal. But for your system, it's not. So the body just burns out. It's like, okay, well, I have to rest, but you don't allow yourself to rest. So it's that when it becomes this normal, that's when it's really deadly. That's where all the diseases come from. And then when we really look, there has to do a lot of this, how we grew up and what we saw around it. And again, everybody who is listening, parents, I already want to say, there is no parent in the world that wakes up in the morning and says, what will be fun today? I'm going to mess up my kids. That's not happening. Everyone is doing the best that we can. But there's a lot of things that, like parenting or culture itself, everything goes from generation to generation. When I thought about my parents, how I grew up, the overachiever is being worshipped, right? Like, yeah, you're gonna die for others. Yeah, you be a martyr, that's yay. You just look outside. We have so many monuments built for the heroes that died for us, And when you think those were overachievers. And even right now, I watch some documentaries on Netflix about some famous people. I realized that all of them had childhood trauma. They always struggling with the father figures in their lives, and they always wanted to achieve more in order to prove themselves that they are worthy of love. So if you grew up in an environment where you feel stressed out because, for example, there's maybe a land that goes generation to generation, there's like a war or something, or there's a trauma, you carry that from your parents. Your parents got the same treatment as you did from their parents. So it goes from generation to generation. How is that you start of recognizing, okay, this is the environment that I grew up. And now somebody can listen to me and say, well, I'm sorry, I grew up in a very healthy family. We're all very, very happy and joyful, and I don't have any trauma. I'll say, human experience itself is already very traumatic. It starts from day one, the first time when you take your breath. Being born, it's super traumatic.
Yeah.
What is stress? Stress is that you're going outside of your comfort zone. I have somebody in the audience says, well, I'm not stressed. I'm cool. I take handling. I'm like, okay, have you ever wear a sweater or a jacket? Why are you dressed? Oh, because it's cold, right? Guess what? That's the body experiencing stress. So you're always stressed. Every day you are stressed. It's just the thing is that how is that you're handling it? And it could be small stress, like just having a glass of water because you're thirsty. But also could be how are you going to manage the stress that's coming at you? Something happens, you're driving on the street and somebody cut you off. You can get very angry because you take this personally, right? I mean, I used to be that person. I'm like, how dare they cut me off? I don't even know who's driving that car. But because I grew up in this hyper-vigilant environment where I just didn't have enough understanding what was really happening. I know my dad is drunk, like every day. I remember coming back after school, I was afraid to go home because I was like, I have no idea what state he's going to be in. If he's a little bit drunk, then maybe he will be still in a good mood. But if he's more drunk, he will throw things. Things will break. And I don't even go home. So this means every day I'm wondering what my day is going to look like. That's not a safe environment to grow up for a child.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be in such an environment with an addict in the house. You could be somewhere who is just totally overlooking your needs. And then no matter what you do, it's just not good enough. In order for us to grow up as healthy individuals, we need to be safe, secure. That's why kids love schedules, because they can predict what's going to happen. So when you grow up in the safety, and then when you have your parents that know how to regulate themselves, and they know how to manage their stress, then the child grows up with learning this. So then an adult knows how to regulate themselves and how to manage stressful situations because they learned this from their parents. And now when the child is small, we need the parents or adults around us every day who help us to regulate our brain, regulate our emotions, because you've probably seen so many times. Let's say you're walking in the street and there's like a toddler that is running and it fell, right? And then what's the first thing that they do? They look at the parents. Like, should he cry now? Cry. Oh, and they say, oh my God, you poor thing. Then the kid is like, oh, this is my cue. Crying, But if the parent says, oh, you're good, it's fine, don't worry about it, we just brush it off the desk, we keep on going. The kid's gonna know like, okay, well, it's not a big deal if I fall. So those little things really adds up. But then that's how you become this over-stressed out adult that impacts your life. And for those who are listening in and saying, well, fine, but I don't have time to do anything that has to do with stress management, like taking a break, time management, boundaries, saying no to people, those that drain you out. You're like, you know what, I'm going to talk to you for 15 minutes, but no more than that. Or not going to the events that you invited, that people pleasing. And it comes from us being a herd animals. We need other people. We do need that. So because we're so afraid that we will be excluded from the group, hence die, we're going to do anything for the people. So when you think it's sad, when you think I have to kill myself in order to survive. Because if they say, okay, everybody's jumping through the window, you're like, oh, shoot, and I really don't want to jump through that window, but everybody's jumping. If I'm not going to jump, then, I'm going to be excluded. You can see that a lot teenage years, because this is the time when you really need to separate from your parents mentally, and whatever other teenagers tells you whatever to do, they're going to do it because they want to be included in the group. That's the thing. You need to learn your boundaries. You need to learn how to say no, but that's also should be taught. But it's never enough. One thing when I realized that I was an adult child alcoholic, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm broken. Something's wrong with me. Like, no, 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 no. It's good to understand where this is coming from, but it doesn't mean that you're broken now and the life is over. It's definitely not. You can be 90 years old and still learn how to self-regulate, how to say no and keep the boundaries and be healthy.
You brought up really good point. Well, two things is taking breaks and saying no. These are two terms that I found out while I was in my career. So I had a boss early. This was like my first job, where I had a boss that said, hey, your schedule's too wide open. And I'm like, what? And I said, what does that mean? Like, you have access to me. You know what I mean? And he said, no. You need to book time to take a break. You need to book 15. He would even tell me like 30 minutes twice a day where no one can book you. I don't care if you're sitting at your desk. I don't care if you go to the lunchroom, walk around the building or whatever, but you cannot be that available. You need to take time for you and to take a break throughout the day.
Wow, that's an all boss.
Yeah, I know. I was shocked. So I took that with me. What I didn't take with me, and I had to learn later in my years, you know how jobs, they kind of offer you courses or whatever. I had just been promoted and it was a group leadership course for a manager. And they said the same thing. You guys need to balance your time, but understand this. You are only responsible for what you say yes to. I mean, I was floored. Like, they could have quoted something out the Bible at that point. I was like, wow. I mean, like, we were just looking at each other in awe because we couldn't believe what he just said. And he was like, you understand what I'm saying, right? And everyone kind of looked. They were silent because I think they were processing. I know what I was doing at that moment. I was like, wow, what do I not say no to? I always say yes. And I always get upset that I said yes, but now I'm committed. I don't even realize that I'm doing this. And then you go back, well, then why do I feel the need to say yes all the time? And you're right. I do feel like I need to achieve. I'm an overachiever. I want to do what others can't, but it's like when you do that, more is expected out of you. So now you're setting a standard that they're going to always come to you. You can't be upset when they're always coming to you now. So I really appreciate what you're saying here because it's relating to so many things to me personally and just parts of my life, in my work experience too. And I pass that knowledge on. I appreciate you for saying that. I think it's so awesome though that you found yourself in a book, because I grew up with my father being an alcoholic. Same way. I was exactly the same way. I wasn't too afraid of coming home because he wasn't an angry alcoholic. He was just an obnoxious alcoholic. It was just like, oh, go sit down somewhere. But I was still in the state of mind where I could never be good enough. I'd never felt good enough. And this is why I want to really promote child literacy, because there's so much that can be found in a book. It's so important to have this outlet for people to just get away. There are things that you're going to read that you're not going to get from someone speaking, because it's how we learn. It's how we gather information and retain that information. So with that being said, you were inspired to write your book. Is that right?
Yes, I'm already 4 times best-selling author. I published myself 3 books and then I contributed chapters to the 2. But 2 books that I wrote, the last ones, that's specifically about stress management. And the first is Crush Stress While You Work. And this was the beginning of my stress management career, when I realized that a lot of us spend so much time in the workplace and we need to know how to manage all that stress. But then when I discovered that the way I was stressing myself out and why that happened, it opened up my eyes. And then when I started coaching other people and realized how many of us are there, that I was not the only one who actually grew up with the dysfunctional parents. And then I was inspired to write the second book that is called Stress Management for Adult Children of Alcoholics. Now, for those who are listening in and they're thinking, well, I didn't have a father alcoholic, nobody's an addict in my family. It is really written for everyone who grew up in a dysfunctional family, meaning your needs were not met somehow, physically, emotionally. Most of the time, emotionally, that's where the biggest damage is done, I think, when the child is growing up. And when I was looking, what does that mean to be an adult child alcoholic, I found this laundry list online that was, and you're doing this wrong, and that's really made me feel, oh my gosh, I'm totally broken. So it's like a whole list of things. So what they did, I really paid attention to what I was dealing with and what my clients were dealing with. And so in the book is 25 chapters, probably could be 255 chapters, but I'm like, come on, nobody's going to read more than 250 pages. So in every chapter, I talk about specific issues. For example, immediate gratification. Like that is actually mentioned as like a laundry list. Like, oh no, you should be able to watch your stock grow. The marshmallow tests and all of that. But in every chapter, I put specific exercises, how to manage stress in that kind of environment. When you feel impulsive, when you feel like, oh my gosh, I need to have this immediate gratification right now. And I also finish every chapter with a superpower because I think that's a good thing. There's something that means your past is something that you went through. That means you have an experience in it. That means you have a tool. You should use this as a tool. That's why I call it as a superpower. Because, just plainly thinking about having not enough patience, it served me very well because I get shit done.
Yeah.
I don't have time for waiting. So I'm like, okay, this is good, let's go. Of course, sometimes I jump over the window because they said this is a great idea to do it. But overall, I think a lot of things that I accomplished in my life or even about myself, it's because I don't have patience for things. So every chapter in the book talks about specific things like fear of abandonment and fear of or difficulty finding relationships and, about things in the specific tips, what to do about that, how to work through, in every situation. And I tell you this, for those who are interested in getting the book, I'll giving you this for free. Hopefully we can put this in the description somewhere, and that's the link will lead you where you can get the PDF book, because I just really want everyone to realize there's nothing wrong with them. You don't have to fix yourself that much. And there is this perpetual journey of never ending, making yourself perfect. At some point, you just have to realize that there's nothing wrong with you. You're just different like everybody else. And believe it or not, everybody has childhood trauma. Okay, that's a human condition. Whatever happened to you, don't take this as against you. Always use this as a tool to help you and others in life. And now, for those who are listening in, they're like, oh, I don't have time to read the books, There's always guilt that comes to self-love and self-development and anything with that, especially if you grow up with a dysfunctional family where you've been told that your needs don't matter. It's like you always need to give. But just remember, on the airplane, you need to put your own mask first, right? And then you can help others. So if there's somebody right now listening, they say, oh, you don't get it. I have 3 kids. I have a job. I'm running a business. I don't have time for this. I have to take care of my kids and my family and all of this. I have only one question. Ask yourself, who's going to take care of those kids in this business when you run yourself to the ground? Who will be there? So if you want to take care of those, start from yourself and don't feel guilty about that.
Wow, that was really good. You were talking to me, weren't you? I know you were. Man, I love that. Miss GSD. Get shit done. So y'all opt in to get this book. All of them?
Yeah,
is the opt-in option? Okay.
It's the whole book. It's the whole book. You can go right now and, of course, buy on Amazon, the hard copy or Kindle. But because those who are listening in this podcast, they can get it for free.
All right. Look at that. Moving with Me in the podcast is giving some goodies out. Speaking of goodies, Lolita, are you ready to give us your golden nuggets to add that ketchup just to recap?
I would say don't feel guilty of loving yourself. You just find the way you are.
Simply put, you don't have to add nothing else to that. Almost emotional. All right, that's the episode today. Are you thinking back to your childhood and how you manifested your avoidance or disdain from a particular scene in those flashbacks? Have you conditioned yourself to a state of false normalcy by imposing a burden of perfection, achievement, or protection to your personality? By all means, pursue your dreams and goals. Become the intellectual, innovator, and motivator that you are, but do so with kindness to yourself. You do deserve that. That's why I appreciate Lolita for sharing her personal story and shedding light on the roots that form our personality and ethics. She's given us tools to break through the guise that we will do anything to keep away our childhood hurt and pain. Even if you have found your superpower to take out the batteries for a recharge from time to time, I'd love to hear your side to the disposing of the imposing. I love it all, and so will someone else. Before I let you go, Lolita, why don't you go ahead and remind the people who you are, where they can find your resources, or reach out to you?
My name is Lolita Guarin. I'm a stress management expert, and for those who want to book a stress management session with me or check out my online classes, please go to beamazingyou.com.
Ooh, Ooh, I love that. I'll make sure to include all of Lolita's resources and connections in the episode description, as well as on my website's resources page, movingwithmeaning.com. Make sure you guys subscribe to the show, Moving With Meaning, the podcast, and tap that alert bell so you know when these episodes drop. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube Music. Please share, like, repost, and follow. Tag someone. We are creating a community. Quick housekeeping before you go. Follow me on Instagram at movingwithmeaning82. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. I do dabble a bit in TikTok at Krystal B. Clark. My YouTube channel is up. Kindly run over there and have a look or two. Links are in the episode. Alrighty. I'm Krystal on Moving With Meaning, the podcast, reminding you to take it one step at a time. All moves have meaning. Check y'all later.